It was a simple question.
Bob Ross is probably the most well-known contemporary American painter.
Ready to have some fun?
His PBS show is still adored by millions of people, but after 31 seasons of painting, you can't buy his work anywhere.
Where did these paintings go?
That question sent New York Times filmmaker Emmy Rhyne down a deep rabbit hole of a tiny, lovable corner of the art universe.
You've arrived.
I really wanted someone watching it to be like, what is going on?
It's going to be in the American history.
Alicia was doing that interview on the shoulder. I was like, do not interrupt her.
Emily's film was kind of left field for a news organization like the New York Times, but 5 years later, it's still one of the most watched videos on their channel.
I felt like I was in a real-life set of The Office.
He's got this ridiculous
Yes.
droopy poodle. And
With the glasses, I'm like, you just can't script that.
The storytelling is undoubtedly well-structured and strategic, but the film's tone is so light and silly and fun.
Bob Ross.
Ross.
Guy with the hair?
Slam on the brakes, hit go, hit reverse, turn left.
So what exactly went into this film that made it such an instant classic? To answer that question, we invited Emily onto the show to break it all down. Emily, I'm so excited to have you here.
I'm pumped to be here.
So before we even start watching this incredible story about Bob Ross, I, at the risk of oversharing, bawled like a baby at the end of this short movie that you made.
I'm so flattered that it was that affecting.
It is just such a special piece of work. And like today, I want to see if we can get to the bottom of like this arc of this story that you tell that gets at least me, and I think other viewers, given how successful it's been, to that place at the end. Like, how do you get us there? How is this story so well told? And so, yeah, that's what I want to see if we can get to the bottom of today.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Here we go.
This is a Bob Ross painting.
Bob Ross
is one of the most iconic American painters of the 20th century. He's best known for his perm, personality, and landscape paintings. The problem is, no one knows where they are.
I'll be your host as we experience the joy of painting.
In 800 feet, turn left onto...
Okay, tell us when you're constructing the first 20 seconds of a film, what are you trying to accomplish in that first chunk of time that's so important, especially for digital formats?
I mean, I think what we were told and what is true is, especially we were thinking about this piece for YouTube, is like that first 3 seconds. And like, this is the 20 seconds to me are those like first 3 seconds. It was like really tight script writing over and over again. And maybe it's like a misnomer to even call it script writing because it was just me sitting with an iPhone. All this is recorded on an iPhone. Like none of this is professionally recorded. We tried to retrack it and it was a nightmare. It sounded terrible, too professional for what it needed to be. But it was just in an edit bay, like with my phone being like, okay, let's try that. It's like probably like 200 voice recordings, like voice notes that I just kept airdropping to the desktop.
So you weren't, it wasn't even a script that you were writing. You were just like watching it and talking at the same time and trying to see what felt good?
Yeah, and there was a team of us that were thinking, like, here's generally what we want to do, but we didn't have, like, exact lines written out. And so it was feeling like, what feels conversational? Like, you can write conversationally, but as soon as you start reading off of a paper, all of a sudden it feels like you're reading off a paper, you know? So it was a lot of just, like, speaking it, where's my intonation, like, how does that feel? Like, is it dropping or rising in the right places? Airdropping it, dropping it in immediately, like, horrible production workflow, just like dragging straight into the timeline and then trying out different takes until it felt like good. Yeah.
Wow. I want to listen to that again. And so for this kind of film, like a documentary, like we're used to David Attenborough.
Exactly how many species rainforests contain is unknown, but it runs into millions.
Why did you go for conversational as opposed to authoritative, say?
I feel like this was also a time where there were like a number of pieces on the internet that were super influential. I'm thinking about Max Joseph's John Baldessari piece.
In 100 years, John Baldessari suspects he will be best remembered as...
Oh, the guy that put dots over people's faces.
I'm thinking about my former colleague, Ora de Kornfellow, had a piece on why your train is delayed, about the MTA.
We have 665 miles of track.
472 stations, 27 subway lines, and almost 6 million riders every single day.
Thinking about Vox explainers, like this kind of like new wave like of filmmaking that was super conversational. And I think being in a space like the Times where we're often authoritative, can we be authoritative but in a more casual way? Like, let's try that out. And it felt after the shoot, especially, these characters were so earnest and goofy and lovely. I felt like I was in a real life set of The Office that I was like, we cannot kill this with like dry voiceover. Is an absolute no.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's kind of how we ended there.
Oh, I want to listen one more time through that lens.
This is a Bob Ross painting.
Bob Ross
is one of the most iconic American painters of the 20th century. He's best known for his perm, personality, and landscape paintings. The problem is, no one knows where they are.
I'll be your host as we experience the joy of painting.
You know, one of my oldest takeaways about creativity is that it's like the fusing of parts that you didn't know could be fused together. Yeah. To form something that feels new, even though they're familiar parts.
Yeah.
The informality of the editing style and the voiceover contrasted with this classical music piece that feels so stuffy and old and formal. And you're almost like, what you're almost telling us in that, maybe I'm overanalyzing this, but in those first 20 seconds, you're like, hey, you know that like stuffy NPR show that you think is this like formal thing? Actually, there's a lot of humanity behind it.
Sure.
And watch this story. And it's just, you say so much in that first 20 seconds in terms of what kind of tone we can expect in the rest of the film.
Thanks. I mean, truly, I think I was looking back at like that John Baldessari piece in particular. It was the use of music in that piece. And I think there's like a shared track in here that was in there too, of using like otherwise like very simple visuals of his office and also then this like just cacophony of classical music. Mm-hmm. It just gave permission, I felt like at that point where I was using mostly like cinematic drones, things with like relatively small amounts of build.
Yeah.
Or you'd find the things on like, you know, the thousands of tracks on APM or whatever service you use where the builds are like really distasteful or like it doesn't work. Whereas this is classical music, like it works.
It
you
works.
know? And so you can kind of trust that like the music rocks basically if you can make it fit. And then the other part is that it gives you built-in drops and moves and things where you have to pause, and it's kind of like the music is also an editor here. Like it takes on the role of editing. It helps me like process story, process like I always talk about the levers I'm trying to pull. Like I'm trying to like slam on the brakes and hit go and like hit reverse and like turn left. And this piece felt like that, where I like really wanted someone watching it to be like, what is going on?
Yeah.
But in an intriguing way, not like a you really need to go to like editing school way.
Right.
Which is fine balance.
There are more than 1,000 Bob Ross paintings in the world.
There we go.
But if you want to buy a Bob Ross, you can't. And that doesn't mean people haven't tried. A lot have. And a lot's been written about it too. Because frankly, it doesn't make sense. In a 1991 article in the New York Times, Bob said he had completed nearly 30,000 paintings. So when this guy wanted to buy one for his brother, he didn't think it would be a problem. He couldn't find one at an auction, in a gallery, on the internet.
We don't know.
And sure, there are a lot of paintings out there and...
Okay, there are such wonderful little moments here where you cut to Bob saying something, doing something that is not what you're saying.
Yeah.
It's like you like pull us out of the narrative for 1 second to give us a taste of his personality, and then you slam back into the narrative. How describe that process? Like, why does that work?
I really think creativity is truly like, I was saying this before, it's like throwing spaghetti, truly, and not to like give a nod to the name of the podcast, but to throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. Like, I do think it's a feel thing. I really like identify with what Max Joseph was saying about audio first editing.
I had all these little pieces, but it didn't cohere. And it was like, okay, well, it needs to go to the sound mix. I'll just do the sound. And then I'll just put the visuals on top of it.
Being able to close your eyes because it's so musical and say like, have you heard my voice for too long? Like, have you heard Bob's voice for too long? Interjection. And like often it would just be like, piece out any piece of archival, throw it in, see if it like the flow makes sense, and then maybe we'll sub it out for a better piece later. But it was really about if the flow was even and felt right. It felt like musical.
It makes so much sense. And so then is the process like you collect a bunch of archival footage and chop it up into little set? Like, how do you prepare all of this footage? Do you go out and shoot a bunch of stuff first while there's a team preparing archival footage? Can you walk us through like the organization and timeline for a project like this?
It started with my colleague Aaron, who is the guy driving the car. He went down this rabbit hole of trying to buy a painting for his brother. I think it was for Christmas. And he could not find one of these paintings. And it really put him down this rabbit hole of where they all gone. And he's the one who made first contact with Bob Ross Inc. He figured out like, oh my gosh, they are in this like warehouse basically in Virginia. And then because it was Virginia, we were lucky enough to just do a day trip down there, just to do like a pre-production trip. I just remember going into the office. It was so casual. The paintings were stacked up against the wall in direct beams of sunlight. It was exactly what you would picture a real life set of maybe The Office would be like. But really in like the most genuine way, like the most soulful way. No one took themselves too seriously. Everyone was so open and honest. And so I remember when we left the office to go to lunch, as soon as the car door closed, I just remember saying, we've hit gold. I hope no one tells these people until we're done filming how great they are because they're just untouched gold. And so I think we just knew that like we weren't going to have to like draw them out of their shells in ways that you have to often draw other people out of their shelves. Like someone bops into your life with a camera and a crew from the New York Times for 4 days even. My house would be so clean. Like, I would be on like tip top. I'd be practicing in the mirror. What am I going to say? And they just didn't have that quality and essence about them. They were just so raw and trusting. And then we ended up going back for shooting, which was a 4-day shoot. And over that time, we did all the interviews and all the filming at the office. So it was a pretty tight shoot for what it's worth.
So that's all the production for this piece. And the rest is like archival.
Yeah, and the rest was editing. The edit took a while. I mean, I was really lucky. I think I had like 2 or 3 months really to work on this, which... I mean, there was like 120 plus versions on this piece.
Oh,
I mean, I versioned very liberally, but it was trying everything. This was not like, I really don't believe in like anything other than the 10,000 hour rule for creativity. I really think it's just about like trying things over and over and over again until they work. And so came back to the edit process and worked with a team, the same team that went down, worked on the edit with me. And then we also had this amazing archival producer, Dahlia, who works at the Times, who helped pool, archival PBS footage, Bob footage, and then also an assistant editor, Meg Felling, who helped work with us.
And otherwise you were the one editing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But I'm working with like, my hands are in the edit, doing the editing, but every couple of days I would like pull in the team to be like, can we watch the 30-second bit? Like, let's get feedback, let's get into it and see what's working.
And who is the team?
It was Alicia DeSantis, Larry Buchanan, who's a graphics editor, and then Aaron Bird, who came up with the story idea. Oh, and I cannot leave out Mike Schmidt, who was the top boss, the executive producer, who greenlit it.
When you're spending 3 months editing this piece and 10,000 hours, and it's really just like the quality of the thing is like a function of hours logged.
Yeah.
How do you not scrub the beauty out of it? Do you know what I mean? Like sometimes when I like really grind on something, I like pull out all of the humanity and nuance and love from it. And then you're left with like this risk-free, perfect little nugget that doesn't move anybody.
Totally.
How did you stay true to like the emotion of the piece while you were getting so accustomed to the little ebbs and flows of it?
That's, I think, where the team really comes in because truly locked away by myself or any editor locked away by themselves for that period of time is going to probably scrub it clean or be like, I felt at times too afraid to show certain things. I'm like, is this too vulnerable or too weird? Or am I going to be like, or they're going to be like, what are you thinking, Emily? But working with that small team who were also really, really good friends, that like worked in tandem to keep us in check and also say like, that's hilarious. That could be hilarious. I don't know what you're doing with that. Like, let's cut it. That was the way that I feel like we were able to preserve certain things. And that was the importance of showing small bits as we went to like hit play in a studio setting kind of like this, lean back and just observe when are people laughing, when are people like sniffling, and then you could clock that. Like, okay, that lands for everyone. That almost landed. Maybe someone like held back a laugh, or that really didn't land. And we can like, maybe I'll play it one more time to make sure they didn't just miss it. And it was down to those like, what, like, you know, the turns, like how is Walt throwing to a net? Like we want characters to throw to each other in addition to the music turning or the music dropping.
Tell me about that. What do you mean throw to each other? Like
there's a point in here where we're in Walt's office talking to him, and Larry's conducting the interview for this one, and he's like, is that a Bob Ross? And he's like, yes, because someone told me it was.
Well, is that a Bob Ross over there?
That is a Bob Ross painting, because somebody told me that it was.
And that's the perfect cut to like the authentication process. That's the throw to a net. And those things, because we're in journalism, those are not scripted moments in an interview. There's no scripted moments in these interviews. And so it's noting as you're hearing these interviews, as you're conducting them, like, oh, that piece is really going to throw well to this piece. And this piece is really going to throw well to that piece. And then that's where I think that like kind of like seamless weaving can start to happen, because if it's just by music or just by scene cuts and we all do it, it feels a little bit more like produced, right? Rather than in conversation.
Awesome. So cool.
Inspired by Bob Ross.
Tap, 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 roll.
But they're not the real thing. So it made us wonder, where could a collection of paintings worth likely millions of dollars possibly have gone?
You've arrived.
What's so beautiful about this is what I thought was the intro, this 20-second thing, is now a minute 18.
Yeah.
That whole thing is setting us up for this incredible mystery. And then we see this warehouse as the answer to the question. And it's so inevitable and surprising at the same time. Yeah. It's just a beautiful Junky shot.
It really is. I mean, going into it, one of the decisions we made before we went, even after the pre-production, but when we were thinking about how are we going to tell this mystery and like really thinking about like engagement, especially then because we were really putting everything on YouTube, was like, we can't reveal the end at 10 minutes. Like we've seen the YouTube drop off charts. We should tell them, right? And so we kind of made the decision, like, we're going to immediately tell you where they are, like immediately answer the question, which really breaks a lot of like story arc theories and concepts and whatnot. But we wanted to do it in a funny way. And so this shot felt like the funniest way to do it, because it's like so dinky, like so small. And the other thing we decided going in, everything was going to be locked off, like everything on tripod. This is not how I shoot on truly any other piece I work on, but we really wanted that like Wes Anderson style, things being like super cinematic, almost everything center framed, tiny motion through the frame. And so this was like, we probably shot for like 15 or 20 minutes until we saw a car and everyone was like, be quiet, get the natural sound, no one move. So fun shot.
It's like even this sign, it's so unceremonial.
Yeah.
You know, this historical person. But then you look at the way he's filmed and his show, and it also is kind of perfect for who he is. It's an amazing marker for his career in like the oddest of ways. I don't know. It's just
totally.
It's a beautiful thing. Yeah, let's keep going.
He did 31 series, each being 13 programs, each having 3 versions. That's a lot of paintings.
Not many people know that Bob actually completed each painting 3 times. One before the show, one during the show, and one after.
So this kind of stuff, is this part of the production or is this done in post?
All during the production. So I actually brought, talking about 10,000 hours, this like shot list that, I mean, I think for me, working with shot lists in the field sometimes feels like very antithetical. Like I'm not working with shot lists on a breaking news story, obviously not. But for something like this, where we knew the style, we wanted to be like super frenetic, and we didn't know exactly how the edit was going to go, but we knew we needed a ton of shots. We needed to do a ton of work on it. We created the shot list, including interviews that we wanted to do with the scenes, like each room, you know, like tight shots of stacks of Bob Ross paintings on floor, 15.
15 shots of that?
15 shots of that.
Because you knew you wanted to cut a lot.
Yeah, and I didn't want to be like zooming in and out of everything all the time, which has like kind of like, I don't know, I didn't know if I would want that feel in the edit of like digitally doing it. So it was like really a masterclass in patience and like building a scene. And so that was for like every room at Bob Ross was like, you know, at people's desks, at the bookshelf, the authentication process, the hallway, medium static shot of every painting hanging in the hallway, 1 per painting. Detail static shot of every painting hanging in the hallway, 5 per painting. That gave me so much to work with in the edit. Definitely overboard, but there's no going back, you know, like everything from like transit to location. I knew I wanted that like diegetic sound of the navigation system saying like, you've arrived.
Okay, so this is incredible. Thank you so much for bringing this, because I think this reveals so much. Maybe the first thing I want to talk through here is some of these are concepts like authentication process. And some of these are like characters. Seamless stop motion is like a cinematic technique. So I guess, how do you know it's comprehensive when you've got it all down? And what are you tapping in your mind to come up with even like these ideas? Front room, authentication process, hallway. Like what are you how are you generating those ideas?
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes from that pre-pro trip that we took down there and seeing the space and being able to visualize it. Something that I feel like I'm relatively good at working, especially in news and not having like weeks on projects in shoots or even days sometimes, is how do I make within a single room or a single building, how can I break off mini scenes that feel discrete and not like I'm like keeping the viewer in this otherwise like kind of claustrophobic office for 10 minutes. And so that's how my brain kind of function to think like, okay, what is the function of the front room? What is the function of the back storage room versus the room where they're doing all the packaging for shipment? And trying to think of each of those areas, not just as like building a single scene around Bob Ross Inc., but each of those is like a discrete video. And this is probably overkill. People will look at this and be like, this is crazy behavior. But it gives flexibility in the edit to create distinct feelings in distinct spaces. Like I must have deleted the large back storage room, but even that space, which is where they're like have just the boxes stacked up and like we did the like, you know, you open it. Like if I walked in there without this list, I would have done the cursory wide shot, a couple medium shots. Let's open the boxes, let's hold them up, etc. But because it was like detailed, like you need 10 medium shots, it forces me to work the room.
Mm-hmm.
You need 20 detail shots. Then I'm like really studying the room. Like, why does it say like credit card statements and baby wipes? Like, that's hilarious. And I think that kind of discipline for me, even being, you know, 10 years into this at this point, it doesn't always come naturally, like, which is fine. You know, I get distracted or I feel stressed out. Like I need to go to a different part of the office or a different part of the shoot. But having it written down helps me. It reminds me that like, just study the space, what you're saying.
Right.
Like something will reveal itself in there, or you'll get bored and then you'll think, let's try that thing where like we both put the 3 paintings into the frame at the same time. And those sometimes are the moments that you're like, thank God I didn't stop shooting. The moment I think like I'm going to stop shooting is when things start happening. Mm-hmm. It's like, I don't know why it's that way. It's hilarious. But yeah, this creates discipline for me.
It's so nice. Let's keep watching.
Which is why there's so many of them.
He would write book on the really, really good one. He would mark one of them TV, and that was the slightly not great one. And then the third one would be marked Kowalski for my mother.
Oh, Annette. I love that dog so much too, Cricket. Too much.
The like, again, there's something incredible about the contrast here. And maybe that is part of what is so moving about the whole piece is like so much of your personality shines through, I think, in the I'm only getting to know you just now. But like, again, the formality of the classical music and the title and the lower third, it's like this, but then he's got this ridiculous froofy poodle and
with the glasses. I'm like, I love it.
It's just, it's that contrast that is so striking and compelling in it, and it pulls you in 2 different directions at once and is so confusing and wonderful.
Yeah, and like I really have to say, like it is such a team effort. We had Aaron and Alicia and Larry came up with so many different versions of even just the like titles of like in the name labels and where the placement of those on the screen impact how this feels in that moment. It's really the like perfect marriage when you bring people together that do what they do so well, you know? And it felt like we were able to like, chef's kiss, you know, like really make it work. Or like discoverer. We were like, is this weird? Like we can't say discovered. Like it needs to be like authoritative at this moment with this music. But
also kind of silly. That's how a 6-year-old would describe the discoverer.
Hilarious.
It's
like
just,
too much. And like the little dog pillow.
Right.
Also, it's fun to look back at it now. Like, yes, this was all part of the plan. But some of these things felt very scary to do in the moment of like, especially, you know, this wasn't par for the course for all of our videos that we made at the time. This felt different. And like it was taking creative risks that felt a little bit scary. And also in YouTube, I remember when we put it up, the feeling of like, this could totally tank. Like truly no one could watch it. Or because it does feel like there's a big part of me in it, people could like mock me or be like, this is crazy. Like, what were you thinking? This is so not funny. That balance of letting your own like kind of like humor guide you felt really vulnerable in a way that I'm not used to as a journalist, quite frankly. It's fun to look back at it now. Like, thank God we didn't move that like silly dog pillow. Like the scene wouldn't have been the same without it.
Totally. And yeah, that risk shines through in this. I mean, the fact that this isn't what I expect from a New York Times video is what makes watching it through the New York Times even more fun.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I like, these are like, this is just a good story. And the Times is about great stories.
Yeah.
So, you know, after this piece, there was a big Netflix documentary on Bob Ross. And I feel like, you know, it's a good reminder. This is like a 10-minute piece. Like something that we have to do a lot at the Times is decide like, we can't tell someone's full story all the time. Like that's like if someone came to me and said, I'm going to tell your full life story, I'd be like, that's ridiculous. You know, like someone can't tell your full life story. This is like that's a huge undertaking. And so with this piece, it was like a really narrow slice of the cake that we wanted to go deep on. It was a simple question. Where did these paintings go? And when you keep that question narrow, that might feel restrictive or boring, but it allows you to go so deep without going like weirdly off topic. I find when I'm working on other pieces is like the wider we start going, because we can't make hour-long pieces, or even if we could, quite frankly, it means we're going like we're just skimming the top of the surface. Whereas this allowed us to like really go into it about where these paintings are and were.
I don't like this being a movie star. I'm old. You know, I know you want to know what that young guy was running around with this old woman. Guess what? Bob and I used to be the same age.
You just can't script that. Even if you wanted to, it just, when that's happening, it's like me behind camera holding the shoulder of the person next to me. I'm like, don't say a word. Like, let her continue her thought here. You know, like, no one's saying, like, why do you think you were friends? Like, she's asking questions, answering them at the same time, like, speaking down to the person. I think Larry was sitting on the ground for this interview. Like, just cannot script it well enough. And I think, you know, when you put that in the edit, it's funny, but then you drop in, like, this, like, wild music. Yeah. And you're like, we're really saying something with this. And it's fun.
We did a session with Max Joseph recently, and he talked about what sections of an interview to choose. And one of the best insights I heard from him is
when you ask people about their past, they start listing things off and they kind of go like this. But then if they see something over there, they're like, oh my God. Or they tell a joke and like they get louder. Someone saying something funny or coming out with a line or a joke, even if it's a non sequitur, will communicate who that person is.
I feel like you captured this woman in 2 seconds. We see who she is.
Yes.
I don't like this being a movie star.
Totally. And I think like we think it's good practice to get it. Like, I am Annette Kowalski and I discovered Bob Ross and I live in blank and blank, Virginia. Like,
so boring.
It's so boring though. Like, it's so dutiful. And this is the same thing. It's like if our interviews are not the longest, there's probably an hour and a half per interview, but that's pretty long for some people's standards. I'm like, let them go long. People reveal themselves. It's hilarious. And so those like small little moments, I think too, we were not expecting this at all from Annette. She had been like notoriously, she hadn't done many interviews. In the Times, I did an interview with her about Bob Ross years prior to this. And in that interview, she was like very dry, very stoic, not goofy. When we got to her house, she's like smoking in the kitchen. And we're like, oh, we're about to get gold. Like, she is just like, I don't know why y'all are here. But we had, I think, won over her daughter, Joan, by this point. And Joan was like, come on, they're great. They're like, not like scary. This is going to be fun for you. And so this was going in for all the pre-production planning we had done. We hadn't met Annette. And so she was kind of the wild card for the actual shoot of what is she going to give us? Like, what is this interview going to be like? Are we going to really be able to use it? And wow. Just blew away expectations here.
She delivered.
Delivered big time.
There are some telltale signs as to whether or not a painting is a real Bob Ross.
Oh, Bob. He wanted no sign of people. I don't know why he did.
God, I love those sound effects. I love also the use of not music, but stopping the music. Like, you stop at these clutch moments.
That's like the lever pulling, I feel like. And that's just like all trial and error. Like, did that come like 2 beats too soon? Or did that come like, a whole measure too soon? Like, are we stopping at the right place? But it's so fun. It's so fun to like pull those levers and like really lean into those like comical, like humorous moments. But they're also, those are like, goes back to like the vulnerability and scary. Because I'm really saying when I drop the music out, like, I believe this is funny, and I believe you should think this is funny.
Yes. And that's so overdone sometimes, and it's not funny, and it feels like you think this is funny, and it's not. And so it actually takes, you go on a limb for that.
Totally. And that's where the team part comes in. That's where, like, Alicia and I would get into, like, full out collegial arguments about, like, this is hilarious, this is not hilarious. And it's helpful to have fresh eyes that aren't like, scrubbing back 300 times over the course of the day. And I decide in my tiny silo, this is funny. But having people you trust to come in and be like, that's actually hilarious. This is like, I don't know what you're trying to do here. Like, we got to cut it out.
Okay, let's hear that music cut out.
Painting is a real Bob Ross.
Oh, Bob. He wanted no sign of people. I don't know why. He didn't like people, I guess.
There's something, too, about the pacing of this. There's a lot of cuts.
Oh, yeah.
But it doesn't feel fast. Do you know what I mean by that?
Yeah, that's very flattering. Thank you. I mean, that's the goal of the music, too, of, like, finding those moments where it's all going really fast and then finding the moments where, like, we can slow it all down. So it's, like, pulling the levers, hitting the gas, easing off the gas, slamming on the brake, yanking right, yanking left. But that's like, I think, the combination of factors here, because there's a lot going on. It's like we have text on screen, we have quick cuts, we have crazy music, my voice, interview voice, archival. It's a lot, to figure out the balance of.
Yeah.
And that's what the staff at Bob Ross Inc. does.
It's 1-800-BOB-ROSS. Yay us, right?
They package and ship Bob's line of paint supplies and largely manage his modern-day image.
This lady painted Bob onto her lips, painting a painting, and then her nail is held up to his arm, and her nail has a tiny clear palette on it. I mean, this is what we want the Bob Ross makeup for.
Exactly.
That was such a fun scene to shoot, because I was like, ooh, we have so much not verite. We just need like natural moments. Like so much was like, I need 10 shots of the paintings. I need 30 shots of the details. We need to do the wide shots of the hallways. But those kind of moments in, I think, all films really humanize it. And it takes some of that like production glossiness away of things just happening.
So are you shooting? Is there a person who's shooting with you?
I'm shooting.
You're shooting?
Yeah.
And what are you shooting on? What is the camera?
I was shooting on my FS7 on sticks, almost all of it except for the Ronin shots, which I like really look back at being like, why didn't you commit? But at that point, we were like, I really wanted to lean into that like Wes Anderson style aesthetic and like just let paintings on the ground be paintings on the ground. We don't need to have like emotion, pulling through and letting the like focus shift. Like, let's just have it be like really static so people can really study the image.
You're saying Wes Anderson, and the centering and the locked off shots and the kind of framing and composition definitely feels Wes Anderson. But the color, like this is a super low contrast image.
Yeah.
And a lot of the stuff in The Office is like really low contrast, like this.
Yeah.
To me, it feels like it probably felt in the moment as opposed to feeling cinematic.
Yeah. And I think there's like another camp of people who would argue it's so log that it's like too cinematic. The color was something that like we really did not give that much thought, other than like at that point in time, this goes against the Wes Anderson model, but I was really against like crunchy blacks and like oversaturated stuff. I mean, that was really as much thought as we gave to it. I am certain this was more grayscale than this until my boss Mike came in and said like, absolutely not, like bump the color. Like, come on, we got to put some saturation on it. And this was probably the middle ground. But at that point in time, creatively, I felt like that like log footage was so cinematic and like so beautiful.
Wait, you mean log without a LUT?
Yeah.
Without color correction?
Oh, yeah. I mean, like, very minimal color correction. I was like, oh, wow, that looks like a real movie. Like, that looks so good. It definitely dates it in a way, because I feel like now it's like things are like definitely more like hyper contrast, saturated, like more almost like digital video.
Right.
Whereas this I like really wanted. I was like, this must feel like film.
Yeah. Yeah.
They were ecstatic. They're like, this is totally going to be an exhibit. And then they invited us out to the Smithsonian to look. It's going to be in the American history. You're so scared. The Museum of Modern American.
It's the Smithsonian National Museum of American History.
Oh, man.
With that music and the time lapse.
Say out loud, your work will never hang in a museum. No. Bob!
Well, maybe it will, but probably not the Smithsonian.
Because why, Bob?
And then the callback to his journey at the very end.
We had to give him his time to shine,
And then you realize the story isn't about him at all.
No, but he got you into it,
Yeah.
It couldn't be just like a hangnail at the beginning. We had to wrap it up. When Joan was saying the like Smithsonian, that was another like grab. Alicia was doing that interview on the shoulder. I was like, don't you dare. Like, do not interrupt her. No one interrupt her. And it's subtle because you don't want her to be like, is everything okay? Like, you have to like kind of like slide your hand and be like, no, don't say a word. And then the fact that like Bob also mispronounced this Smithsonian or whatever, you're just like, you really, it cannot get better than this.
There's something about a little bit of humor injected right when you've pulled on the heartstrings and opened people up.
Yeah.
To get people to laugh, you get that wonderful like laugh cry at the end, which is what I was doing. Like I was right about to like break into tears, and then you hit me with a joke, and I started laughing, and then it was just like crying.
Yeah.
It's so well done. The emotion of that ending is so just beautiful. Only like I feel like who else does that really well is Pixar.
Yeah.
They, like, put a
oh my
joke
gosh,
in.
Wow. In the same sentence. I am so flattered. My God.
But like they pull on your heartstrings, and then they add a little joke, and it just kind of like opens up the floodgates.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Totally.
Yeah.
God, I wish I remembered exactly. It was the ending was either the first or second thing that I edited. There was such a clear ending with it being in the Smithsonian and like whatnot. And I remember that piece of music I had in a folder of just like, I think it was like a wish list folder. Like one day, like cannot use this for like breaking news or like some of the very sad things that we cover and make films about. But I was like, what would this look like dropped into these, sound bites? And this was probably, the ending was the least edit intensive because it's like, it slows it down. I want people to like reflect, think on like, look at these archival photos of him and think about his life. And so it's less like that technical editing of like zoom out, zoom in, whip pan, things like that. So the music in the sound, like the interview sound, really could take center stage here in a way that was like really refreshing at the end, I think, just to let it breathe.
Emily, this was amazing. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this was amazing to hear how you think about this, and appreciate you taking the time to be on the show.
Thanks for having me.